Good afternoon, and welcome to today's IABC Heritage Region webinar, Event PR and Planning, How Ford Reinvented Michigan Central Station. My name is Greg McCormick. I'm Communication Chair for the IABC Heritage Region. In a few moments, you'll be transported to a professional development event presented in March by IABC Detroit and PRSA Detroit, featuring communication leaders from Ford Motor Company and the creative agency Civic. Last year, Ford Motor Company acquired the iconic Michigan Central Station and announced plans to transform it into an urban ecosystem built around the future of mobility. Ford plans to create a 1.2 million square foot innovation campus for work on autonomous and electric vehicle businesses, as well as design of urban mobility services and solutions. During today's session, you'll hear about the communication, public relations, and event planning, creativity, and strategy that brought the groundbreaking event to life and continues to help the project gain momentum today. Afterward, you'll have the opportunity to join panelists for a brief live discussion on how to apply the inspiration and insight we've gained. Presenters in this inspiring local session, recorded for our benefit, include Christina Twelftree and Marissa Bradley, both from Ford Motor Company, and Stuart Ruderfer from the award-winning creative agency Civic. Before we hit the play button, we have a couple of housekeeping notes. I'd like to introduce Amy Miller, Region Finance Chair and our Tech Associate for this webinar. Amy will review a few quick points to help you gain the most from this webinar experience.
Thank you, Greg. Because this webinar features a recorded session, we won't be stopping for questions while the session plays. This recording is about 50 minutes, and I think it gets more and more interesting for those of us outside Detroit as it continues, covering points from strategy to images of the kickoff, to results, a highlight reel, and storytelling examples. Afterward, Greg will moderate a brief live Q&A for today's attendees. Christina Twelftree from Ford will be among those available to answer questions. If you'd like to join the conversation, here are some questions on your screen that may spur discussion ideas for you. If you'd like to send us a comment or question before the recording ends for discussion afterward, please use the chat button in the toolbar at the bottom of your screen. Just mouse down to the bottom of your screen and your toolbar will appear, including the chat button. If any of you have joined with others watching in the same room using a single connection, that's great. If that's your situation, please do let us know how many are at your location using the chat tool just for our records. We appreciate it. Today's webinar is being recorded. As a registered attendee, you will receive the following: a link to our very brief survey as you leave the webinar. Please take a moment to respond so we can keep making improvements. You'll also get an email with a link taking you to the recording of this webinar, as well as slides. And you'll get a link to register for our May webinar if you would like to do that. And now, back to Greg.
Thanks, Amy. One more quick note. This Taste of Detroit may also whet your appetite for a visit to Detroit this fall. Why? Because our regional conference will take place in the Motor City, September 22nd to 24th. Detroit was rated by Forbes magazine last year as one of the 10 coolest cities in the US to visit. More information will be coming to you via email soon, so we encourage you to save the date and watch for more details. Now, let's imagine we're in Detroit and find out how the revitalization of an iconic landmark came to life. Amy, let's get started.
Thanks. Good morning, everyone. Are we all awake? And warmer, hopefully. Well, thanks for joining us, and I'm certainly excited to be back. A little test. I have 4 weeks to go before I'm back full time, so it's a good little ease back into it. So really glad to be here. I'm excited to talk about kind of what's been happening over the last year plus to get us to the past June announcement, and certainly to where we are today. And Christina will touch on kind of everything that's advanced since we announced the Michigan Central Station in June. So if we can go to the next slide. We're going to start actually with, our video's rolling. We're going to roll with just a quick overview of a history documentary teaser, just to give you a scene setter.
The Detroit thing is all about surviving. We're from Detroit, and we're strong from Detroit.
Detroit was Silicon Valley in the early part of the 20th century.
In many ways, the American dream really was created in this locale.
Many people saw Detroit for the first time stepping off a train. And the first thing you see is this incredible building.
Michigan Central Station was Detroit's pride and joy. What a grand, grand building it was.
A colossal structure. People could look up in the air.
It was almost like going into a cathedral.
What happened with this train station is just a story that happened over and over again all over the city.
Detroit went down through the floor.
This is a big empty building in the middle of one of the baddest cities in the country.
The train station is emblematic of Detroit's rise and fall, but my hope is it becomes emblematic again for Detroit's rebirth.
Michigan Central Station has been acquired by Ford, is going to add to the great story about Detroit's renaissance.
Detroit is returning with the future of the auto industry, and we're planning to launch our autonomous vehicles.
It was once absolutely spectacular, and our goal is to make it spectacular once again.
There are things happening in the city that are just literally incredible.
Detroit is a place of possibilities. You know, that ingenuity and that spirit lives on.
Detroit is my roots, and it's a great city, and it can be great again.
Coming July 1st, only on History.
Great. So we just want to use that as a little opener, and we'll talk about kind of how we worked with the History Channel to bring that to life in a fairly short amount of time over last spring to get us to launch in early July. But I think that scene setter says it all, and probably what you all had experienced at some point of the enthusiasm, the interest, the passion for not only the train station, but obviously what's happening overall in Detroit. And so that's what I think the one takeaway as we leave here this morning for us all as communicators is the power that communications can bring to any sort of announcement. It was well beyond an announcement. We as communicators have the ability to really have a transformative moment for the company, the brand, the project that you're working on. And this really served as a really big proof point for us on how big of a deal, you know, a real estate acquisition really could be. So if we want to go ahead to the timeline, I just wanted to do a quick scene setter for everyone here because the pieces kind of came rolling out, and as you're local, you probably heard the speculation, but really back in December of 2017, the activity started in Corktown right here at this building where we announced the acquisition that we had built or purchased this building, and we were going to move our first couple hundred employees down here. And then that started the chatter, obviously, into 2018 of what else was Ford doing. And obviously, the real rumors and speculation from a communication standpoint started in the spring around March, where you started to see the coverage, and our friends at Cranes and Automotive News, we swear had cameras posted throughout Corktown because they knew anytime there was movement happening at the train station, or if they saw meetings happening, and there was too many Ford vehicles parked down there, we were certainly getting the calls that, hey, did Ford purchase, or is Ford purchasing the train station? And so all of that started as early as March, and where we were starting to, obviously planning was underway, but from a crisis communications, or, you know, as PR people trying to keep the story and keep the lid on the story, we were working hard to keep that as quiet as possible. And to be honest, we didn't purchase the train station at that point yet, so we really couldn't talk about anything. But that all started in March. And as I mentioned, planning was underway. A couple other things just worth noting as communicators. We obviously purchased the train station from the Maroon family And they were great partners with us up until the announcement, but they also wanted to do their own press conference. This has been their building for a couple decades. They felt really passionate that they were turning it over and wanted to tell their story, and they were going to go out ahead of our announcement. So everything we had planned and were planning for June, regardless, the news was going to be out ahead of the big events and the open houses and everything that we were working through. So again, as we look at the communication strategy and how we take advantage of that, or how do we benefit from communicators, that's something that we was new to our plans and just had to adapt with it. And then about a week after, we started to do the formal announcement, which really started with the teaser projections that we started to project on top of MCS for about a week leading up to the event. And then we had the announcement in the open house for the community, and we'll touch on that. But I just wanted to do a quick level set on kind of how what we were dealing with over the landscape. So if you look at kind of how this all started, as I mentioned, this was much bigger than just a PR plan or a communications plan, and it really was around coalescing one big vision. And this started beyond just the communications team and beyond the marketing team and beyond Ford Land as a real estate acquisition. This really became how, as a business, are we going to project how Ford is moving forward and where we're going for the future? And it was actually much bigger than Ford. It was really about the future of the auto industry. We're trying to make a statement that things are changing in what we do on a day-to-day basis for transportation, and we see the future here in Detroit, and it's not just about Ford, it's about the other automotive partners, it's about our suppliers, and it's about future talent we're trying to attract. And so our vision became much bigger than, we're going to announce that we bought the train station. Working with all of our partners at Ford, and honestly with the government, city officials, state officials, other businesses in Corktown, and our suppliers, that's where kind of our vision of creating tomorrow together came from. And it was so crucial to have that kind of aligning moment early on with, again, not only our internal organization, but partners around Detroit and around the area to help us deliver on something bigger. So once we had that vision and working with all of those partners, we established 6 objectives, and normally we wouldn't probably advise for 6 objectives for projects, but this is obviously a long-term project. And so I think, Stuart, you and I can just kind of, we'll tag team these and talk through them. But first, as communicators, we really established that this is not just a Ford story, this is not just a Detroit story, this really was an opportunity for a global storytelling moment. And we'll talk through that in a minute, but it was amazing to see the impact of how much the story resonated around the country and around the world. And if we hadn't embraced that early on, I don't think in the short amount of time, a couple months that we had to pull it all off, I don't know that we would have reached as many people because you have to think about all your audiences. And so, I think one of my takeaways, again, stepping back, is thinking about all of the different audiences, all the constituents that we could reach, and how are we going to do that? And as communicators, we have the power to do that. If you have the ability to work with your other senior partners, whether it's on the technology side or the marketing side or whomever you're working with brands or your businesses, that's what made this successful for us to think as big as we could. And so not being shy to really go big is where we started. So the global storytelling moment was really key. And then this was also a moment to demonstrate a brand shift for Ford. This was a conversation starter that got the attention outside of the people we talk to on a day-to-day basis. We're all vying for talent, as we know, in the region, and this was a really big opportunity for us to make a statement that wasn't, again, just about, hey, we want you to come work on Ford's cars and future technology. This was about where we see the future of the industry, the potential that this region can have, and really a nice way to kind of play in with the resurgence of Detroit and the fact that we want to be just as committed to helping develop the region in the future. So this was a big opportunity for us to start that conversation. And then finally, this was also a moment, what we called of rallying the base. This was an extremely proud moment for the employees at Ford, even retirees, and even our dealer body, who it wasn't about necessarily selling cars, but the statement it made and the commitment it made to the city and to the region, which obviously we have been part of for more than 115 years, was an opportunity to really get people excited and energized. And there's no doubt a lot of tension in the auto industry right now, and even in the technology industry. And so this was really a nice moment for us to capitalize on, and also give, I think, a preview to not only our current employees, but again, the future talent that we're excited about this future. And yes, there might be unknowns, but how are we going to use this opportunity to really get people energized and kind of get people buzzing to go on this journey with us, which should mention, this is at least a 4-year project of the renovations that are going on, and this was much bigger than just the train station. So there's a lot of opportunity to kind of bring people along. So those are 3 of the 6 objectives, and I'll let you take the other 3.
Okay. So yeah, I'll try to fly through quickly these other 3, and I did just want to, I guess, well, the first one, build an iconic moment. Sort of as we get into that, I did just want to say at the top, this is the sort of thing that a project like this, this is like the project of a lifetime. This is what a privilege to be able to work on something like this. I'm from New York. I live in Manhattan. Many of us from our company are New Yorkers. We have folks in LA and then a bunch of people now here in Detroit. And people in New York are starting to feel like, am I moving here? Am I running for mayor in Detroit or something like that? Why am I constantly talking about this very special energy that's here? It's unlike anything that I've experienced in my life. And so, you go into a moment like this, kind of building this iconic moment, understanding that, there is a history here. This is a hallowed ground, and what's going on is it's really different. You travel around, lots of other places, and the energy here is just a different kind of thing. So, that puts a lot of pressure on how do you get that right? How do you, sort of dial this in a way where you have an iconic moment that, a company that's 115 years old and a building that served this city and then became the symbol of decline, how can we get it just right so that people here at Ford, but also people all throughout the community will actually feel proud again that this is going on and that we're treating it with the right kind of respect and the right kind of reverence that it deserves. And so, when we talk about building an iconic moment, we dug in right away to the archives at Ford, and you see these other iconic moments that Ford has brought to life. The 100th anniversary of the Rouge, but the Thomas Edison event, his 100th birthday, which is something that Henry Ford did, which kind of became an inspiration. It was called the lighting event, and it kind of became an inspiration for lighting up the building. As you look at all these things and you think, like, my gosh, like, in the past, they have created all of these iconic moments. How do we fit in to that arc of the history at this, incredibly important moment? And so I just always think, because there's such a rich heritage here, and that applies not just to Ford, but to all of Detroit and to many of the companies who have been around and made this city what it is for such a long time, that there is a really rich history. And if you're going to tell a story like this about going to the future, then it's really important to go back to the past so that it feels very connected and feels like it's something that's authentic and real. And it's not, in fact, just a tech company, coming in and saying, like, okay, here's, sort of our big new vision. So, and then, in terms of engaging the community, that's another one where you can't fake it. People know everything now, right? Information is everywhere. People live in this community. People work already in this community. And how many times do you see around the world where people say like, well, we're coming in to do this big development project in this neighborhood, and then right away, there's protests, there's gentrification. I mean, we just saw right in New York this Amazon thing that happened, and of course, I've thought a lot about this project in view of that, and like, yes, this went incredibly well, but that wasn't obvious at all when you get started. And that's not just a communications thing. That starts with Bill Ford being incredibly, big-hearted about all of this and wanting this to be something that's going to work incredibly well for the community. And then everyone throughout the chain feeling that and feeling like, well, if we're going to have this event, let's go across the street and start talking to the people who live here, and let's talk to the neighboring businesses and see how can they begin to advise us on what we should do here that will feel good. How, we'll show you in the event how we involve the community. But my point there just being, that community engagement is a real thing. That's not a tactic. That's not a, something you put just on the slide. Like you actually have to go and, walk the community and have those conversations. And that's where a lot of the great ideas come from. And then sustaining our momentum, I think, is very related to that. I think also many of us see big corporate announcements and it happens, and then there's a long lapse after that. And this happens a lot in development because development takes a long time. This project's going to take 4 or 5 years. If we don't, and Christina's going to talk a lot about this, if we don't stay engaged with the community and continue to keep everyone involved and sustain the momentum that we have, then it does just start to feel like, oh well, I guess that was just kind of an announcement, and then sure, when they're ready, they're going to come back and do things. It's like, no, we were here for Halloween and for Christmas and the holiday lighting and all that. We'll get into some of those details, but anyway, that I think is kind of what I wanted to cover here quickly. And I did also want to say, just that, we're going to try to fly through this as quickly as we can because, we're all in the communications thing. Of course, I say that after having said all these long things just now. That wasn't that much of a joke, but I knew it would get a laugh. So thank you very much. You are our friends here in the first row. So anyway, we try to go fast and then just have a dialogue because we want to talk about what you guys want to talk about. We did have this amazing experience doing this, a huge, event, a huge privilege, all that, but we want to focus in on what will be helpful to you.
So that being said, but one thing to note on these aren't changing, right? We're using these as we continue the sustaining portion that Stuart was talking about and Christina will touch on. And the business is using this, right? So Ford Land is our real estate partners in this. This is just as much part of a commitment that they have as they move forward, as well as our tech partners, the people that are employees that are already here in the Corktown area, right? This isn't going to leave us as we go forward. And so just, as communicators, we can be hopefully the team that really helps crystallize these and helps our partners, whether again, internally or externally, continue to deliver on these time and time again. And I feel like this is part of our job to always go back and say, are the actions we're taking as a company or as a business, are we delivering against what we set out to do originally, and are we staying consistent? And certainly they can change and they can morph, but we really, these are beyond communications objectives that are continuing to guide the project today. So if we move forward, one area that we just wanted to touch on, and won't go into a lot of detail, but when this started, you can imagine people thinking, that, oh, this is a Ford Land announcement, this is a real estate announcement, and we're buying a building or buildings, and you already have some of your team down there and that's working on autonomous vehicles and electric vehicles, and so we're going to grow that team, and that's going to be the story. And it wasn't the story, but we also had a lot of alignment in bringing the broader Ford team in the fold to learn about this project, because there wasn't a lot of people that really knew what was happening with the acquisition of the properties and what we were going to do with it. And so we, the communications team, were really tasked at being that team to kind of help bring the company along as the different pieces of the strategy and the business strategy on why to buy it, where to buy, everything that was happening. And so we created a war room of sorts that became our day-to-day kind of space that we lived out of, and we brought the team members in and out to kind of hold these discussions to help not only shape certainly how we were going to do the announcement, but more importantly, what were the business decisions and commitments we were making, and who were all the partners and constituents we need to continue to involve as we got into the project. And so if you want to go to the next slide as well, we looked at everything from where we were today, but we also thought as communicators it was our job to paint the picture of the potential of where this is going to go. And to Stuart's point on how you keep the sustainment going, the community engagement, that's really, not to look at this in detail per se, but the idea here was to show, our partners in technology at Ford, who aren't necessarily communicators or marketers, to show the potential that a presence in Corktown and the partners and talent we want to attract, how that's going to help us advance our research and engineering, or how that's going to help us advance our autonomous vehicle team, et cetera. And so we really tried to paint a landscape for the internal team on what this is going to look like over these coming years, over the 4+ years that we're going to have development. And I think that, again, it's beyond press releases, it's beyond key messages, it's beyond speeches. This was really communications helping deliver a strategy. And I think, it's something that I think we all should be proud of as communicators, that we can have the power to do, and that we're not just here to write, and we're not just here to answer media calls. We can be the foundation to help drive strategy forward, and I think that's what gets me so excited, not only about this project, but what our field has the power to do. And so that's just a snapshot of kind of how we kind of coalesce the Ford team and continue to kind of bring all the partners in, because we were obviously trying to keep this as secret as possible as we got up to the June announcement. So that's just a little snapshot into our thinking and a lot of the work that Stuart's team helped us bring to life. Again, I think one other piece of advice and recommendation, as Stuart mentioned, they're from New York, or a lot of them are from New York and LA. It was really helpful to have outside perspective on this. We have great talent here in Detroit and great partners that we continued, of course, to work with on all of this. But it was also really crucial to have some outside thinking that pushed us on what the perception of what we were doing in Detroit, pushed us on the perception even of maybe what we're used to doing from an event and kind of community engagement standpoint. It just really brought some fresh thinking and also different connections. I think that's also powerful, and we can touch on that quickly as we get into the event. So when you look at the communication strategy, we really wanted to focus on kind of 4 areas as we're all communicators. We touched on community engagement, and so let me start there, and then Stuart, I'll let you take the next one. Beyond the community engagement of the Corktown community, as we mentioned, that was crucial, and a lot of that had already started with Ford Land, because they were already starting to research the other real estate in the area. Obviously, the conversations had gone on, so that communication and community engagement had started. But more importantly, it was how else were we working with City Council and the rest of the Detroit, essentially government officials, state officials, Wayne County officials. So there's that element of it. There was also element of, there's the residents, but there are some very active, vocal residents in Corktown who are influentials. And so how do we start to engage them on our early planning, even ahead of the announcement that we were purchasing the train station, trying to understand what are their needs? Are we hitting, as we Ford plan out the business, not just the announcement, are we hitting their needs? Are we going to take into account what is most important to them? And so when we looked at community engagement, it was much broader than much broader than just the, kind of the Corktown businesses or the Corktown real estate development. It was much larger than that. And then on last point on the community engagement, I think the other piece also was how do we already had a presence in Corktown forming with the team that's down here. How do we start to become good neighbors? And that was part of the strategy early on as well. And even when we first announced the building here, that was something to keep in mind, and the team currently consistently is having to pay off on, are we being the best neighbors we could be doing, and even getting the Ford Fund and our volunteer corps involved more in Corktown than ever before. So a lot of that community engagement, we were thinking at all ends of the spectrum, and was really key to delivering not only, again, a great event, but delivering hopefully a consistent voice and a consistent story to where we're going as Ford and what we wanted to be committed to for the area.
Very briefly, I know we're going to run short on time here. So yeah, in terms of the visuals, I just think the opportunity, as Marissa was saying, to sort of think a little bit out of the box. This was something a little bit different than a vehicle program or launch or introduction. And so it's like, that sort of opens up a lot of possibilities that are kind of neat to think about, well, what's going to be right for the Ford brand? What's going to feel right for Detroit and for the city and for Corktown? And then, with that, where can you, how can you experiment and build in sort of a new way? So, that's what we did. And the visuals, similar to what we were talking about before, were really predominantly about the community. And I would say, overall, that's what we were trying to do. It's like, we're going to have a big spotlight that we're going to shine all over the world on Detroit, on Corktown, on this building, that day. How do we, as Ford, use that spotlight to, in fact, highlight the community and what's here? And if we do that, I believe that actually a lot of affection will be showered back on Ford. But that was a unique way to think about stuff, right? Because we're much more accustomed to saying, like, well, let's lead with the brand and let's lead with the product, and we really flipped that here. And I think that in this case it worked well.
And just one other point on visuals as communicators, a lot of it also was painting a future that didn't exist yet. And so I think at the time, and we ended up creating animations, and you can go to our media site and you can see a lot more of the assets that we created. But, again, the time and the diligence it takes to also, create and make sure you're planning for those. I know it seems like a no-brainer, but an animation obviously doesn't get pulled off overnight, and we're creating something that really wasn't even designed yet. And I think trying to paint that future, or paint a picture of that future of where we're going, was just as important, because everyone wanted to know not only what were we going to do with it, right? What was it going to look like, and what was this broader neighborhood going to look like? So runs the gamut on the importance of visuals, and Stuart also touched on it earlier. The power of our archival, footage and photos, and working with even the Detroit Historical Society, right, to really uncover all of the history that the train station in Corktown, the richness that we had to work with, and making that all available. Obviously, it's a no-brainer as communicators, but that was such a powerful kind of toolbox for us to have. Media and partner storytelling obviously is key, and in our, the media relations piece of this was a big component to pulling off a successful announcement. And a lot of that were, the early conversations that you have with people like the New York Times and CNN and CBS and, and other outlets. We really looked at how can we divide up the storytelling, because there was so much to talk about. How do we take advantage of that and really have a great placement strategy leading into it that, again, we had to give people an early sneak peek and brought people in, and fingers crossed the embargo didn't break. We all love those embargoes. But that type of thing was a really, obviously, key component to having that drumbeat of news hit when we wanted it to, and also to help honestly cut back on some of the other speculation that was just so inaccurate. We couldn't really correct it yet. And so having those really strong foundational stories in place, as any communication strategy, is really key. And so I don't want to gloss over that, because that's always obviously first and foremost top of mind from a PR perspective. And then finally, paid amplification, and that's where our relationship with marketing at Ford, we're two separate organizations, and so having great partners in marketing, we didn't do a ton of massive advertising, but we did in the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times and the local papers take out a one-page ad with excerpts of Bill Ford's speech. He was so passionate and so committed to obviously what's happening down here that it was really an emotional moment that, for a car company and for those of us that know Ford for a long time, like, we're not always as emotive, yes, on our products, but as a brand, it really can vary. And so this was really a proud moment, not only for him, but for what the future of our company was going to be. And so we worked with marketing not only to do some traditional print, but certainly obviously social amplification, and working with the History Channel to produce a documentary, and working to get something bigger than just some press clippings and B-roll out there, really having a substantive kind of hero piece of content that ran. So just those were kind of the four main chunks that I wanted to at least touch on here. We can certainly go into further detail. So I know you all were interested in hearing on the event and the open house, we had started kind of a teaser campaign to get the drumbeat going. We knew the speculation was going to be out there, and so that's where we had the idea of starting to tease what was coming through projections on MCS. And so we started about a week prior, and what we did was pull a quote essentially from each decade that was significant about Detroit, or was significant about what was happening, and that was just a great way to rally the community, rally the excitement around what was happening, and kind of get people really tuned in to that following week when we had the larger announcement. And photos and the social shareability of that was a huge benefit to kind of get the chatter going, and it gave the drumbeat of excitement really built from there. And then we got to the event. I don't know, do you want to kick off the conversation around the event and kind of our thoughts behind building up to more of the community celebration?
Yeah, I think we've covered this. I think again, this wasn't very much about doing something particularly loud or something like that. I think we viewed this as the beginning of the journey, right? So we were just announcing the project, and it's a great, ambitious vision, but it was just the beginning. And so it was not about, having fireworks and doing, something that's super big and flashy, but what's just like the appropriate tone and manner. And then to, give Bill Ford and Jim Hackett the opportunity with this special backdrop to begin to lay out the vision for where they're taking the company. And so I think it was a combination of that, and then wanting again to really lift up the community in this, involve community members in the event, and we did. And then with the open house, we sort of again thought like, well, historically, what happens, as sort of big events, you think about like, a presidential inauguration or mayoral inauguration, something like that, there's often an open house that goes with that, right? Because it's sort of the people's house. So, come on in and see. And people hadn't been able to get access to MCS for, 30 years or something like that. So the idea of opening it back up, and then, it was a small idea. We kind of threw it in there and thought like, well, let's see what happens. And man, I don't know how many people I think it was like 30,000 people or something like that actually ended up showing up. And the stories that people told about their families being there and going through there and bringing pictures and bringing, some of the older members of their family who actually use the station, that just created a sort of emotional moment, I think, for the community that was even more than what we expected.
Right, and so I think just to build off of that, on the announcement itself, we involved a lot of the youth and tried to bring to life, obviously, the future of who could be working and using MCS and the broader Corktown, could be living and working in the broader Corktown neighborhood, and so that was a big inspiration. Certainly you had the role of the government officials that had to take the place, and we also, wanted to hear some actual voices of people that have already been transforming Corktown, who have already been transforming the future of the talent in Detroit. And so all of that was fodder and inspiration to kind of building out the program. And so we hit on kind of all of those. And then we wanted to end with, a little bit of entertainment. And so luckily, great relationship with Big Sean, and he got to come in and, kind of cap it off, but because he's so committed to Detroit, and it was just kind of kind of perfect combination of a way to bring it all together. And so that was, kind of the announcement itself. And so again, could we have done a typical, kind of ribbon cutting and have all of the, the governor and the mayor and the Wayne County commissioner and Bill Ford and Jim Hackett up there all smiling and cutting and celebrating the purchase of the building? Yes, but, again, stepping back to those bigger objectives, this gave such a massive opportunity for us to capitalize and build on something that could be much more meaningful to a broader audience. And then, as Stuart mentioned, the community open house over that weekend, I think what was key was we tried not to overdo it, right? The building speaks for itself. People just wanted access. How many of you actually got to come down and were in it? Not that many then, not that many. So everyone's dying to get maybe back in before we start renovations. So we tried to keep it fairly, simple. We did do an exhibit with the Detroit Historical Society and brought to life what it was like in the imagery of the train station in the glory days. And so we had a really great curated not only exhibit, but also a walking tour, which people really enjoyed to see what it looked like when it was in its heyday. And then we had a little bit of a nod to the future, and that's what that last image is showing. We wanted to hear from everyone coming to share their stories, either of what they remember and the passion that they have for why this is so important of a moment for them, but also the enthusiasm for the future of Detroit. And so, this was a projection inside that we projected on the ceiling of the grand lobby, which in scale was really quite breathtaking, but it was really about communicating the future. And so it was a great social opportunity where people could submit their wishes, submit their memories, and all of that was constantly being curated through a projection. And it just gave people a way to feel like they were able to really kind of give their voice into how they might shape what our plans for the future. And so again, it was just a way for people to feel engaged. And then we kind of skipped over the artistic vision, but I think also along the way, because Corktown has already been such kind of a creative neighborhood, we really brought that into how we built out the Roosevelt Park and the whole green area. As you were waiting in line, the lines were quite long for people getting in, and so it was a great way to feature local talent and help kind of give some inspiration to where we might be going. So that's just a really quick summary of kind of how the week and weekend kind of came together. And so we'll can quickly just scroll through these, and we can have these running later for anyone that wants to see them. But as you take a look at kind of what we had going on, this was one of the lines of the open house, obviously, but just really being able to capitalize on the building spoke for itself, but being able to capitalize on how do you take your story and continue to build on that. And so that was, the middle was a large screen that we were able to roll the profiles on.
On the building, you know what you didn't see? You didn't see a massive Ford logo. So again, how many times have you seen a real estate announcement? You see a developer come in and they're like, hey, now we own this. And then you have the ribbon cutting and all of that. That is not the spirit of Ford. That would not have been the right, idea here. And so, but a lot of instincts, right, as marketers, communicators, is like, well, hey, where's our logo? How many times you go into an event and the, CEO or somebody's like, gosh, I don't see our logo enough. Not the case here. Not the case. The idea was to focus on the building, focus on the community, and yeah, this is powered by Ford, and people will get that. So anyway, I do think that's really a huge credit to the leadership of Ford, that they were willing to take this chance to go in a direction like this that was sort of unbranded or quietly branded, and it worked very well.
So this was inside the projections that I mentioned, so just give you an idea of a scale of kind of what it felt like inside. Just keep scrolling through here quickly to give you guys a snapshot. And so the open house, obviously vast. This was also something worth noting. This was not a project with unlimited budget, and we all have budget constrictions. Certainly we, had enough budget to be able to pull all of this off, but this was also something where in a building this massive and over a stretch of a week and a half that we were continuing to have to kind of pay off our storytelling, you really had to be smart, and you have to make those tough decisions, and we certainly had lots of tough budget discussions on what made sense, what was going to be the most impactful, in the debates of what you cut, what you keep, and feeling good after the fact, feeling like we've made the right decisions. But you can also see that we tried to really just play into the space itself, and you only needed to communicate or bring to life what was most crucial for the audience. And I think that was, just always something good to keep in mind, because you can always go bigger. We always could have had Ford ovals in every column if we needed, but that's really not the way we took it, and really I think came off in a great way that the community could really appreciate why they were there. And yeah, just keep scrolling down. I don't know if some of you saw this. We even had a group of nuns that came to visit, and they decided to start singing and blessed the building as they were in there. And so again, this happened over the weekend. It was one of those many stories that just kept the drumbeat and the excitement going. That was not about Ford at that point. It was just about the excitement of what was happening in Detroit. And so I wanted to throw that one in there, because that's not an everyday scene for a Ford event. And we even had our weather problems with no ceiling in a lot of the part of the building. As the rain came in, we still were able to keep everything moving. And I think the last slide, just quickly, and these are, round, rough numbers, just to give you a snapshot. We had over 25,000 people come through, the community come through over the open house, and that was something that, was definitely not easy to pull off because there was fire codes and restrictions and those types of things, and there's, of course, continues to be demand because we couldn't let everyone in. But as communicators, I've never been able to pull off an event where we've had over 25,000 people come through before, right? And so I think, when you look at, again, the impact you can have on some of these projects, don't sell the event short, don't sell your vision short. I think it was just something I look back like, this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and it kind of all came together. We had over 200 media come in, and it was outside of even Detroit media. People flew in, people wanted to fly in to be part of this, and the attraction of once the buzz got moving, more people wanted to come back, and we continue, Christina and Dawn and the team that are here, continue to host people literally on a monthly basis because that has, obviously the passion and interest has continued. So, from a PR perspective, we were pretty excited about the number of people that just wanted to come in on their own. In the June timing, we had more than 550 traditional clips between press and broadcast. So as I know, a lot of times that's the only way to measure sometimes as we're in communications. And so we just, were really, it couldn't have gone better, and it couldn't have happened again without the importance of having that one narrative, one story, and really continuing to pay off on that. So I think I will wrap it there before we turn it over. I don't know if you have anything else, Stuart, to add, and then we want to open it up after Christina talks. I think we have one other reel. If it's really choppy, we'll cut it off because I apologize that the technology is not, it's maybe because it's so cold this morning, it's not working. That's what I'm going to blame it on. But we'll do a quick highlight reel just to give you some entertainment.
Detroit is the historic hub for automakers, but that industry is getting 21st century competition from Silicon Valley. The Ford Motor Company is stepping up efforts to compete. It will reveal plans this morning to transform a 105-year-old train station into its high-tech base for the future of automotive mobility.
For decades, Michigan Central Station was the place where you knew you'd arrive. But once the last train pulled out, it became a place where hope left. It's time for that to change.
Ford is announcing that it is going to do more. This is a long-abandoned, iconic train station in the heart of Detroit that has become this icon of ruin, and you're not okay with that.
I hated that. I remember the train station when it was vibrant and it was an awesome place.
We want this station, a place that many people suggested should be torn down, to be a beacon of development, opportunity, and possibility all over again.
I heard somebody say, don't call it the train station, call it the brain station. That Bill Ford Jr. is planning to give Silicon Valley a run for its money in terms of recruiting really smart people to come here.
We are.
Today, the Michigan Central Station has a new owner, Ford Motor Company. It's time to remake this station into a place of possibility again.
Hi everyone, I'm going to talk quickly about the post communications that we've been doing. So I joined the company actually in September, the team here. So the event had already passed, the buzz was still going, and there was just so much goodwill out there because of the event. So I was tasked with the team to just sustain all the excitement and the storytelling from that event through a communications plan that will really last for the next 4 years while this Corktown development is underway. So the project will take 4 years. It's actually a construction site right now, so Michigan Central Station is closed to the public, but we want to find opportunities to be able to still bring it to life, bring the community along on the journey with us, and keep engaging. So that's the focus of the next 4 years, and then of course when it opens in 2022 we have more opportunities for fabulous events like we saw before. So I'll talk through some of the elements of the communications plan that we're focused on at the moment. One is just continuing the community engagement that was started with the June event. And that can be done a number of ways, through big events and through smaller events, and even face-to-face meetings with the community. So events like the Halloween family-friendly event that we hosted in October. I don't know if anybody went along. It was really a lovely special occasion where we had families from the neighbourhood, the impact area we call it, which is about 4 neighbourhoods surrounding the train station, brought their kids along. They all dressed up, and some were able to go into the train station for some trick-or-treating, and we also had a row of vehicles lined up for trunk-or-treating. And at one point, I think we had about 2,000 people lined up along the way. 3,000, yeah, and we gave out 80,000 pieces of candy, I think. So it really was a wonderful way to bring the community together in quite a low-cost, sort of effective way. But it was all about that community spirit and engagement. And then we've had smaller events like the Detroit Free Press Film Festival screening. So in November last year, we showed the History Channel documentary that you saw the trailer for earlier. We had 2 screenings of that inside the train station. It was November, so it was quite chilly. Everyone brought their beanies and gloves and blankets. We had food trucks outside, so they brought hot chocolates and coffees in. And they actually sat there for full 45 minutes to watch the documentary, and then they took the walking tour. So the same as the open house, we actually put up the same signs and they walked around the train station and did a loop. And it was just incredible to hear those stories come back, those ones that Stuart and Marissa referred to. Everybody who goes into that building has a story, whether it was their parents that went there or their grandparents who went off to war. There's a story that everyone has, and it all comes back when they go into the station. And then we want to keep the community informed of the development along the way, the key milestones that we're reaching, as well as any mitigation issues. When we, back in September, October, while we were finalising incentives for the development, we did promise to the community that we would keep them informed, that we came up with a community benefits ordinance package that will invest $10 million in the local community over 4 years, but we also pledged things like preserving the culture and history of Corktown, helping improve safety and other elements. So we've made a commitment to communicate and keep our promises, and that's what we are doing. So we're doing it through traditional ways. We've got all the information on our website. We have email addresses and phone numbers, but we know that in this area, in this neighbourhood, some people don't have access to computers or may not be checking emails. So we're doing other things like a newsletter I have here, you can have a look after, but it's a new addition to our communications. It's hot off the press. And this is a way that we can keep people informed. It really focuses in on the development itself, anything, demolitions that are going on, training programs that we're holding, all these things that are really relevant to people living in this community. And it will be hand delivered to all the households in the neighbourhood this coming Friday, I believe. It'll get started. So this is another way that we can communicate, keep our promises, and also do it in a way that is authentic to the community. Right next door in this very building, but to the right, we'll be opening an information centre soon, hopefully in the coming months. That's just another way for the community to come in, engage with us, learn about the project, and as we have new information, we can share it there along with other channels. One thing the vision for the Corktown campus will be as a place to test some of our mobility solutions that we're developing for the future, to test it here in an urban setting. And we don't need to wait 4 years to do that. We're already starting to run pilot programs. So back in December, January, we ran a pilot with our Go Ride micro-transit service and Gleaners, which is a food bank. And we helped the community who didn't have access to vehicles to be able to go and collect food from food banks if they needed it. Previously, they may not have taken what they needed because they had to carry it home walking, or they just couldn't make their appointments because they didn't have a vehicle. So we've been trialling these mobility solutions, testing it, and then sharing updates with the community and others and our own employees to show that what we're building here in Corktown is happening right now. And then finally, it's this incredible content and storytelling opportunity that you saw from the June event. So the train station, just the restoration process itself, just creates an incredible amount of awesome content. When we had a big event in January, the Michigan Central Station Winter Festival, which, because the construction, we couldn't go inside the building, we had a great 3D projection that was on the outside, a 9-minute just awesome piece of content that a lot of people were able to take videos, share on their social platforms. It really got a lot of traction. And then we engaged the community inside. So all these content creation moments, we're grabbing them and sharing them. We're taking photography of the restoration. It's quite a process. And then we have the storytelling. So the people that are being touched by this project, whether they're a small business, like here we have Adrienne Bennett and her son. She is one of the first female master plumbers in North America. She's working on the project with her company, Benkari, and doing some temporary plumbing systems in the building. She herself remembers the train station because her family used to come and go from there when she was a child. So, and these are just incredible stories, and they touch the development, and we want to be able to tell those along the way. So I think we can leave it there, open it up to questions. We welcome those, and yeah, thanks very much.
Thank you for watching with us. I don't know about you, but I enjoyed feeling like we traveled to Detroit for this experience. Christina Twelftree from Ford and several IABC Detroit chapter members are with us today to respond to your comments and questions over the next few minutes. While we wait to see if any questions arrive in the chat, Amy, can you unmute the line so that anyone can comment?
Everyone is unmuted now.
Hey, this is Gary Spondek from Detroit. Just wanted to say, Christina, thanks again for sharing this time with us today. And was hoping you could share a little bit of insight, since you've been on the ground for several months now, on some of the amazing things that have been happening.
Yeah, sure. Hi, everybody. It has been an incredible journey so far. I actually joined Ford on this project in September, so it was after the June event, but a whole lot has happened since then. So we, back at end of last year, we went through the CBO process. So that was about listening to the community and understanding what they're looking for. And we had a community benefits ordinance process of investing $10 million in this community over the next 4 years. So a lot of work has been done in setting up the programs that we will be rolling out over the next 4 years, job training and communications, preserving the history and culture of the area. So a lot of work in that area. Of course, there's the construction project itself. So they're starting with Michigan Central Station. The construction work there started in December last year. And the first phase has been about drying out the building and shoring up the structure to make sure it's safe. So that process has been going on almost 6 months now, and they're going to start the second phase of construction there very soon. So a big part has been informing the community about what's happening in terms of construction. We have a building that's about to be demolished later this month. So we have very clear guidelines on how we want to let the neighbourhoods around these buildings know what's going on. And then there's sustaining the momentum from that June event. So holding community events, newsletters, opening information centres. So all of this opportunity for us to keep the storytelling going and to keep painting that picture of what the future is going to look like in 4 years' time once we open the campus.
Greg, did we have any more questions? We have about 2 minutes left.
Now, we do have a question in the chat. Let me read it for you. It says, how is HR leveraging the strategy in terms of Ford's employment brand and talent acquisition plan?
Yeah, it's a great question. One of a key factor behind this acquisition was about retaining and attracting new talent for Ford in the future as we expanding beyond just an auto company and into the mobility space. We know that we need new talent, software engineers, coders, this sort of to attract a younger talent base to provide the workspaces that they're expecting in an urban setting and having great workplace experience. So a big part of the development is about attracting and retaining talent. We opened in May of last year the factory building, we call it. It is on Michigan Avenue, so it will fall within this campus development. And right now it holds about 250 people from our autonomous vehicle and electric vehicle teams. So they're already living the sort of Corktown experience already. They have great office space. It's a renovated factory, so it's a very interesting space, very open planned, lots of collisions between the Ford employees and the community around it. So this is a sort of window into what we think that the campus is going to feel like and look like. So we're doing a lot of videos and interviews and really showcasing what's happening already down there in this factory building.
Great, thank you, Christina.
It's time to wrap up, Greg.
All right, it's been great talking with everyone, but before we conclude, I wanted to make sure you're aware of a few things as we part company. In case you'd like to mark your calendar today, our next monthly webinar takes place on Wednesday, May 22nd. The title, What Are You Waiting For? Renew Your Skills, Mindset, and Career Today, is presented by Jennifer Waugh, Chief Storyteller of Forward Communications Incorporated. It's a great update on the ways to make the most of your career as communication professionals. Watch for a registration link in an email from us soon. Again, if there are any questions we haven't answered, don't hesitate to email them to communication@iabcheritage.com. Thank you again for joining us, and have a wonderful afternoon.